Thank you all for being here today. I know on a Friday, it's not the best time, but we're here. We'd like to welcome a guest I believe we have at the table with us. Senator Branning, would you like to introduce your helper?
Thank you. I'm so pleased to have Evan, my youngest son, Evan, with us today. I know that we're going to get a lot of work done now that Evan is in the building. So thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you for being here, and we'll look for you to tell your mom how to handle everything, okay? All right, first bill that we will look at is Senate Bill number 2081. It's about appointed state officers and provide for the removal of such by certain forms of willful neglect. That is Senator Blackwell's bill. Senator Blackwell, if you will explain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you would allow me, I have Mr. Ted Booth from Peer who will do the presentation of that.
That'd be quite good. Ted?
Regarding removal of officers for willful neglect. By statute, removal is of an officer is a judicial function, and there are a lot of things that sometimes officers fail to do, like respond to subpoenas or attend regular meetings, and there's very little you can do about removing them because they have a fixed term of office. And during that term of office, unless you fit within definitions of willful neglect, they can't be removed. So what this bill does is create a remedy for that problem. It provides that the governor, the state auditor, the House or the Senate can resolve that someone should be removed, send the matter to the Attorney General's office to review it. And if the Attorney General determines that it's appropriate to take action, the AG can do it. And the certain things that could result in removal provided for under this bill include failure to respond to a subpoena, failure to repay funds that have been ordered to be repaid by the auditor, or failure to attend more than 3 consecutive meetings. So what this does is provide a way to deal with some cases of officer neglect on various boards and commissions. So that's the bill.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Blunt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Booth. This question for Senator Blackwell. I'm curious to know whether you think defiance of a subpoena issued by a legislative body should prohibit that person from seeking office. That if it, just as a matter of principle, if a legislative body subpoenas a public official, should that public official not be allowed to serve or not be allowed to run for office in the future if they refuse to comply with that subpoena?
They're already in office.
Or they either are in office currently and are being subpoenaed about the activities they engaged in while they were in office, or they're no longer in office, but they're being subpoenaed by a duly constituted legislative body.
I would have to take a look at what the circumstances were, but I think they need to appear.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Senator McDaniel?
Question to follow up to Senator Blackwell as to Senator Blunt's question. And I think the distinction in some respects would be that I don't think your bill deals with elected officials, does it?
It does not.
Just appointed officials. And so, to Senator Blunt's point, if some elected official decided not to appear before a body, that would be up to the people to decide his removal, right?
To my understanding, yes, sir.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? This is a committee substitute. Do I have a motion?
Title sufficient, do pass, committee sub.
Motion is title sufficient to pass, committee sub. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is Senate Bill 2083. This is open meetings, legislative advisory. Committee members must be invited to stay. I saw Senator Boyd earlier. There she is. I'll ask her if she would to explain the bill, please.
As many of you in here serve as possibly to advise, this was a bill that was brought to me by one of our members who serves as an advisor to several executive agencies, to their boards and different commissions. And as most of you know, as an attorney, that a lot of the true work of what that agency is doing is in the executive session process. And so what this would do is it would allow our members to sit and listen to during that executive session process. And so they believe that you really can't properly advise that agency. You can't really know what the work that is being done in that agency when you are excluded from the executive session process. And those of us who are fortunate enough to be attorneys who have sat in those boards, we can completely concur with what's being said here. So this is a bill that would allow the legislative body to go into those executive sessions. Now, the legislative members would be bound, just like those board members are, with confidentiality when they go into those executive sessions.
This is an explanation of the bill. Thank you, Senator Boyd. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Hobson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Boyd, can you give us an example of what committees, I'm not familiar with this and the need for it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just don't know what we're talking about here.
We serve as advisors to a lot of different commissions that legislators do, the State Health Insurance Board. There's a number of them, per State Personnel Board, and that's a particular one. Board of Health. We serve, I mean, we have members all over the gamut on this. And so this kind of just, there was a member who brought it and then several members concurred with this. This would be very helpful to them in understanding the true issues of the agency if they could at least just sit and listen during these executive sessions.
And as you said, the legislative members would be bound by the same, or at least the recommendations of confidentiality. Legally, there's no requirement, but that I'm aware of, but not that I disagree with your bill, but I think all legislators need to be advised. I think we have a bunch of legislators that have no idea what executive session means or what you're supposed to do. And I would recommend that our legislative members understand that fully and appreciate the sensitivity, because I know I'm an attorney for some public bodies, and I know sometimes you go in there, you're talking about personnel issues that can be very sensitive, and board members are not supposed to say anything about it, but sometimes you hear legislators come back talking about things that they shouldn't be talking about, and it concerns me that things that shouldn't be publicized, for them to listen is okay, but for them to speak out about it, causes me concern. So I think that should be understood, and maybe I don't know if it needs to be included in this. I guess not, but I'm worried about that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
I think your concerns are absolutely appropriate. And I think that we as legislators, and particularly rules committees, probably should make recommendations to remind legislators of that. And I think that's duly noted, but I still think it's a good bill in making sure that legislators really can appropriately advise and really understand the agencies that we're funding and looking at.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Have a motion title sufficient to pass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Boyd. Next on the agenda is Senate Bill 2810. State employees provide the terms and conditions for state employees to engage in telework, which was not even an issue before COVID, and now it is an issue. I'll recognize the head of our director of peer committee to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. This bill grew out of a report that the peer committee did this past year on telework. And as the chairman said, this became quite an issue during the pandemic because many agencies established various work at home or telework kind of policies for their employees. This bill takes the position that the general policy in state government that employees in state government need to work their 8-hour day at their workplace should be still the general policy. However, it creates some exceptions. And these exceptions include teleworking when there is a declared emergency, as there was back in, and when the COVID-19 virus reached pandemic proportions back 2 years ago. Instances where someone has, under a doctor's order, been told that he or she's health would be threatened by coming to work simply because of a diminished immune system problems or things like that. Instances where somebody is responsible for staying at home and taking care of such a person. And in cases where the office space could become literally dangerous to occupy. Imagine this situation where you come in and the basement of your building is flooded with sewage because a pipe is burst. You might have to send everyone home for 2 weeks, and it's certainly not the fault of anyone in the agency. So the committee endorsed these narrow exceptions for teleworking as exceptions to our requirement that people need to come to work and be at their office working. In addition to these standards, the agency would also have to determine that the kind of work the employees are doing are appropriate for telework. For example, at Pier, much of our work is project work. People can take their work home and work on it at home, but the agency is going to have to determine whether that's appropriate. And in doing so, they may seek guidance from the Personnel Board. The Personnel Board wrote some guidance for folks during the pandemic that looked to us to be quite good and could be dispositive of the question of whether or not a type of work is appropriate for telework. And also, if you do telework, you're going to have to sign an agreement that ensures that you will be subject to accountability, agree to oversight. You have to file regular reports with your supervisor so that they can determine that you're getting your work done. Anyway, that's the bill as introduced.
And that is a committee sub. Any questions? Do I have a motion? Motion is titled sufficient to pass, committee sub. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is Senate Bill 2164. Senator Thompson, I believe this is your bill. If you will, please explain it to us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. So this is a bill to create the Mississippi Department of Tourism. Currently, tourism is under the Mississippi Development Authority. Mississippi Development Authority manages a number of different industries and across various business sectors throughout the state, ports, economic development, managing grants and loans, but they also operate the Department of Tourism. So just from a broad perspective, from an overview, tourism is Mississippi's 4th largest industry. But we have the lowest travel expenditures of any state in the Southeast. In 2019, our travel expenditures were $6.7 billion, which is almost $1 billion behind Arkansas, which is the next lowest state. Other than Arkansas, our neighboring states outpace us in travel expenditures by 2 to 3 times annually. All of our surrounding states that we compete with have a dedicated Department of Tourism. So, and we passed this bill out of the Senate last year, I believe 51-1. So just to go through the bill quickly, by section. Section 1 creates the Mississippi Department of Tourism. Section 2 lays out the responsibilities of the department. Section 3 creates the executive director of the department and provides that the governor shall appoint the executive director with advice and consent from the Senate. Section 4 lays out the authority of the department, namely to develop and implement a comprehensive strategy for branding, advertising, promotion, and development of the state's tourism product. Section 5 lays out the duties of the executive director. Section 6 authorizes the department to establish a grant program, which is similar to what currently exists under the MDA. Section 7 authorizes the department to sell tourism and other advertising. It also creates the Department of Tourism Advertising Fund. Section 8 creates the advisory board. The advisory board currently exists under MDA. This would simply transfer the advisory board to the Department of Tourism. There is a typo on line 177 where it references the Mississippi Development Authority. That would, I believe from speaking with council, that we can change that without making a committee sub for it to reference the Department of Tourism. Same typo is on lines 198 and 203. It's simply carried over from current code. And that's an explanation of the bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I would note that the effort here is not to criticize what MDA has done or is doing with tourism. The effort here is really to create a solid, a department that's dedicated to tourism so that for purposes of reviewing the efficiency and effectiveness of of those tourism efforts, that it would be a little bit easier. I will note that that PEER has provided us a review of the Mississippi Development Authority's Tourism Advertising Fund. And part of that PEER recommendation was to allow PEER the authority to conduct a review of the effectiveness of MDA's tourism marketing efforts. This bill, if we do create a department that's solely dedicated to tourism, would make that review much easier. And so we can evaluate the effectiveness of the state's tourism efforts. And that's an explanation of the bill, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
All right, thank you, Senator Thompson. I think we need to go ahead and make an amendment to the bill and come out with a committee sub of the typo that you mentioned, because it's mentioned 4 or 5 places. So do I have a motion that we make those changes?
So I move that we revise the references to MDA to correct to the Mississippi Department of Tourism where appropriate throughout the bill.
Okay, you heard the motion. Is there discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, we're now on the committee sub. Do we have any questions of Senator Thompson regarding the committee sub? Senator Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Thompson, you mentioned expenditures. Could you maybe explain that a little bit better? Are you talking about money that we as a state are spending on advertising to attract people? Or is this money coming in from tourism?
That's money being generated by tourism throughout the state, and we're falling behind.
We're lagging behind the
Other
other
agencies.
southeast.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Senator Branning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know how other states handle tourism activities? Is it lumped in with their economic development arm, or is it separated in most cases?
We have a survey of all 50 states, but for our competing states that we compete with, Louisiana, for example, Louisiana has a dedicated Department of Tourism that's under their lieutenant governor's office. They're much different executive branch structure than us, but they have a dedicated Department of Tourism. That's all that agency focuses on.
Okay, and is there a cost associated with what you're trying to do?
This would be thank you. That's a very good question. No, this would simply be removing pins from MDA and isolating and dedicating those pins to Department of Tourism.
Thank you.
Other questions by members of the committee? Do I have a motion?
Title sufficient to pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass committee sub.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is Senate Bill number 2165. It's regarding state agencies and prohibiting travel to state, county, or municipalities that has banned employee travel to Mississippi. This bill prohibits state agencies from approving state-funded travel to any state, county, or municipality that has enacted a law that prohibits their employees from traveling to the state of Mississippi. This act will not apply to travel that is required for any of the following purposes: litigation, to meet contractual obligations incurred before the effective date of the bill, to comply with requests by the federal government to appear before a committee, to participate in meetings or trainings required by a grant or required to maintain grant funding, or to complete required training necessary to maintain licensure or similar standards required for holding a position if comparable training cannot be obtained in Mississippi or a different state, county, or municipality that's not affected by this subsection 1. The Attorney General shall post on her website a current list of states, counties, and municipalities that have enacted a law prohibiting travel to the state of Mississippi. And the term state agency does not include a county, municipality, or other unit of local government. I'll be glad to entertain any questions. Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a question, but at the conclusion of the question, I would like to speak on the bill.
Okay, questions? Senator Butler. Yes, state of California has restricted travel to the state of Mississippi. They will not pay for any of their employees, state employees, to travel to our state. And so this is just a reciprocal law. We're not starting the fight. We're just saying, if you're not going to spend money in Mississippi, we don't feel like our Mississippi taxpayer dollars should go to your state. Senator Hobson.
Just by way of, thank you, Mr. Chairman, by way of clarification, we have certain compacts. Is the legislature included in this, or is it separate?
The legislature is included in this.
We have certain compacts with groups, for instance, the Energy Council and Uniform Law Commission, where we have certain obligations and duties. I don't know if those would qualify. Is California the only state, to your knowledge, that has the ban?
Oregon, I think, has done it. There's several that are beginning to do it.
So if we had a meeting with a compact and we're in a compact, would you be precluded? And you're on, for instance, executive committee or something, would you be precluded from going to a meeting in that state?
You would not be precluded from going, but you would be precluded from paying for it with state dollars.
Even under those circumstances where you're part of a compact?
That is not specifically delineated, I don't think. Now, we could add that to it. I understand your question and what you're getting at there, so we can be glad to take an amendment on that if you'd like.
I would move to amend that the organizations for which and with which the legislature has a compact, that you would not be prohibited from going to a meeting in those states.
Okay.
That's not very artfully said, but I think you know what I mean.
I think I know what you mean. All right, we have that amendment. You are making that motion. Any questions of Senator Hobson about his amendment? All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Now we have a committee sub, I guess. So now any further questions on the committee sub? Senator Blunt, I believe you wanted to speak.
Mr. Chairman, this is not a good idea. I don't know what states have done this, but it seems like a red state, blue state thing. So I'm just thinking about the big blue states out there. And if the National Governors Association wanted to have an event at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, state couldn't pay to have anybody go. If the director of MDA wanted to go to Silicon Valley to meet with the top software developers in the United States, the MDA staff couldn't go. If the state treasurer wanted to go to New York and New York decided to do something like this, and the state treasurer wanted to go up there to meet with folks on Wall Street and bond people and talk about borrowing money, he couldn't go. If the National Conference of State Legislatures holds its annual meeting in Chicago, which is their most regular site because it has the most convention space and it's in the middle of the country, in Illinois, which is a blue state, decides to do something like this, nobody from the state of Mississippi can go. This is just not a good practice. I don't support what California has done, but we've cut travel significantly for ourselves and for all state agencies. But we need to trust ourselves and the elected officials I named and the agency heads that I named to go do let them go where they need to go to do their jobs. And we don't need to escalate this silly fight that these other states have started. We need to let people go where they need to go. And this is just not a good idea, and I ask you to vote against it. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak? This is a bill that I introduced. I introduced it and I've thought about it. I thought about it and decided in the heat of the moment how angry I am that a state will try to, or a municipality will try to change another state's policy by a silly little rule that you can't go there. Maybe my response is a silly little rule, but I assure you, after several months' thought, I still want to introduce this bill. We've got to draw the line somewhere to say, we're tired of trying everybody to tell Mississippi what to do. It's our turn to speak up. And in my way, we've given lots of ways to still use and go to states that are doing this. Senator Hobson's just made an amendment to ensure that some of the other items can be done. But it's time for us to stand up for our state and say we have a beautiful state, a state that has great tourism, and we need you to come to Mississippi. We also need you to come to Mississippi on business. And if you're not going to allow us the opportunity to have your visitors, we don't need to have the opportunity to spend money in your state. It's kind of like the reciprocal law of bidding. Many of you may or may not know that we have a reciprocal law in Mississippi. If a state has a 5% discount for local vendors when the state offers contracts, then Mississippi vendors get 5% when they're bidding on contracts. That 5% difficulty is an advantage to our contractors here in Mississippi. It's reciprocal. That's all we're doing. We're not naming new states. We're not doing anything like that. We're only making it reciprocal on something that some other state municipality started, but not us. We did not start it. We're just saying, here are the rules. I would ask you to vote for the bill. Any other comments, questions? The motion is title sufficient to pass committee sub. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Bill will come out. Next bill is 2373. This is, I believe we have Senator Wiggins on Zoom. Thank you, Senator, for being with us. If you would explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to come to you from afar. Bottom line is, it's a simple bill. What it does is simply allows the governor to pick the best people for the surveyors and engineers on the board. There was some difficulty in the last couple of years in trying to make those appointments. The current law requires appointments from that are made from the association, and that's very restrictive. And what we're trying to do is to have the best possible people on this on the board. So that's what the bill does, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Do we have any questions?
I like to speak.
All right, no questions. Senator Hill, you'd like to speak on the bill?
I didn't realize that Senator Wiggins had this bill that he was bringing up, but for quite a number of years, I have been filing bills and looking at the practices of this board in its current form and how the members are appointed. And if you sit on appropriations, you will have seen thousands upon hundreds of thousands of dollars that have been paid out because of lawsuits that this board created against duly licensed businesses in this state. And the Fifth Circuit has entertained lawsuits twice by this board that have cost the state a lot of money against duly licensed businesses. And that board has operated in an anti-competitive manner, in my opinion, with the members that have been through the process that we are trying to change. So I see Senator Wiggins's bill as something that is absolutely needed because we do not want any board to act as an anti-competitive arm of an industry. So I fully support the bill and I ask you to support it.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else? Any questions? Mr. Wiggins, would you like to close?
No, I just thank Senator Hill for her comments, and there shouldn't be anti-competitiveness going on, but it should also be about getting the best possible people on such boards. And I think that many people know that we consistently see bills before us in trying to address such things. And I think this will allow us to improve the administration of government.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? That was sufficient to pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Senator Wiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next is Senate Bill number 2797. This bill creates the Deficit Prevention Act. It requires the state agency to notify the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker of the House, and chairs of the Senate and House Appropriations Committee within 15 days of a determination that there is a likelihood of a deficit for the current fiscal year. The bill also requires a state agency to work with the state auditor and DFA to develop a plan to avoid or limit any deficit. This plan shall include limiting the travel and conference attendance to those to that deemed essential by the director of the agency, and restricted the purchase of equipment, vehicles, and other non-necessities. The term state agency includes all agencies and institutions that are required to submit a budget to the legislature under Code 27-103-103. With that said, are there any questions? Do I have a motion? Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next is Senate Bill 2800, the public bid law, clarify reverse auction. This bill clarifies something that happened last year. The legislature, through the County Affairs Committee, passed a bill that said the reverse auction shall not be used for term contract purchases. Because of the word shall, entities are not allowed by current law to use reverse auction for term contract purchases, even if they wanted to. So this bill clarifies last year's bill by stating that a purchasing entity is not required to use reverse auction for term contract purchases, but it may use reverse auction if it wants to. Do I have any questions? Do I have a motion? Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Next on the list is Senate Bill 2092, the Mississippi Development Authority requiring a periodic peer review of effectiveness of their tourism advertising fund. And I believe the director is going to speak to us on that bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. At this time, I would like you to recognize Lonnie Edgar, who's the Deputy Director with PEER, who oversaw the production of the project which gave rise to this legislative proposal.
Thank you. Mr. Edgar, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. Like Ted just mentioned, this is actually a bill that came forward as a recommendation of our report that Senator Thompson actually referenced earlier. It was our annual review of the PEER or the MBA Advertising Tourism Fund. And so what that does is require us annually to produce a report that just kind of basically lays out how the fund what funds were collected and how the funds were expended. So this kind of what this bill, Senate Bill 2092 does is actually kind of adds an extra layer to look at the accountability of those expenditures. So what it would do is actually look at the efficiency and effectiveness of these expenditures by adding a once every 4-year period, with the first review occurring on or before December 1 of 2024, just kind of looking at how they spent the money, not only to what contractors were selected and what, the total dollar amount spent were, but actually like the effectiveness of this money. So really the nuance in this bill is that it allows the peer staff to actually contract with a private consultant that would be paid for out of the tourism fund itself. We didn't want to add any overdue burden on the fund, so it does an amount not to exceed $100,000. This is not a new mechanism. This is something we did with the Jackson Convention and Visitors Bureau back in 2018. We were given the authority to hire a private consultant to review the Visit Jackson organization. And so we did that, and it also had similar language of up to $100,000, and we spent roughly $50,000 on that. But we did have an exit conference as a result of all of our peer projects with the interim executive director of MDA, Laura Hipp. And she had no real concerns with this recommendation that we put forward and supported it. Her primary concern was just making sure that we would not hire someone that had essentially a rub against MDA or applied for any kind of tourism funding and things like that, in which we made that same assurance with the Visit Jackson. So I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Want to have questions? Senator Blunt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will just say that you referenced the Visit Jackson situation, and I think that went very well. And we had a repealer for that organization, and the Jackson delegation we limited that repealer to 1 year and made it conditional on the work that you did. And that report was helpful to us in making that organization run better. And so I think if it's based on that model, it's a good idea. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions or comments? Do I have a motion? Motion is title sufficient, do pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, I believe that's the last bill on our agenda. Let me do say, remember, Monday afternoon at 3 p.m., we will have another meeting. And then anticipate another meeting on Tuesday, mid-afternoon, to take care of bills that have been double referred with us last. I know we're meeting a lot. All right, do I have another motion? Rise and report. Thank you very much. This meeting is concluded.